Dan, are you ready to go?
I am.
All right. It is 7 o'clock, and I'll call our meeting to order. Dan, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Valento.
Here.
Councilmember Monson.
Here.
Councilmember Byström.
Here.
Councilmember Husnick.
Here.
And Mayor Bain.
Here. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members of council, we have an agenda before you this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
So moved. I'll second.
A motion from Councilmember Munson and a second from Councilmember Valento. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? And agenda is approved. Our next item this evening is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of their choosing. We do ask that you limit comments to 3 minutes. And Dan, do we have any open forum attendees? Open it up for the audience. Anybody attending tonight and wanting to speak in open forum? All right, with that, we will move on to our.
Oh, Mara, there was a hand up at the back.
Is there a hand up? Is that a no? Okay,
She's on the
all right.
agenda.
We're glad you're here. With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Council, before you, we have consent agenda items 6A through 6I. I will entertain a motion or any changes.
Mayor Bain, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through I.
I'll second.
Motion from Councilmember Byström and a second from Councilmember Husnick. All of those in favor of the consent agenda signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And consent agenda is approved. For our regular agenda items this evening, we will start with ordinance 705, which is 232nd Street zoning map amendment. And Donovan, I believe you're walking us through this.
Certainly. I'd like to present the zoning map amendment for 435 232nd Street, which is the home of Stacy Novak, who's present. And this is for a property that is located adjacent to the minor subdivision property that's also on the agenda, but is a separate application. The property is located up here just north of the intersection of, it's near Broadway Avenue and just east of the intersection with 232nd Street, shown here. It's a single-family home. And the reason that the zoning map amendment is required is because you can see how it's kind of in the midst of a red commercial parcel, in the midst of all this medium density residential, the MXR1 district. And so with that, I believe this was something of an error when it was originally zoned, and thus the city is sponsoring this application. But this would, in some ways, this is, I think, correcting an error because on the map, it looks very much a part of the larger approximately 40 acre parcel that Mr. Smith owns, who's our next applicant. And so for me, it's actually kind of undoing an error and creating a conforming use for the residential use rather than a non-conforming single-family use in a commercial district. Also, I believe it might allow Ms. Novak to not pay commercial taxes on the improvements as well. I think that was one of her comments. So this did receive unanimous Planning Commission recommendation of council approval to adopt the ordinance 705 in your packet to affect the change of this property from B2 highway commercial to MXR1 residential. With that, I'm happy to take any questions from City Council.
Thank you, Donovan. Council, what questions may we have for Donovan this evening? if no questions, happy to entertain a motion on ordinance 705 as well.
Madam Mayor, this particular ordinance makes sense to me because the fact that that's really not a residential spot anymore. And so therefore, I would make a motion that we approve the ordinance 705, an ordinance amending the city of Forest Lake official zoning map rezoning property located at 4535 232nd Street from Highway Business B2 to mixed residential, single family and townhouse MXR-1.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilmember Husnick and a second from Councilmember Munson. Any further discussion on this item? And hearing none, all of those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Our next item on the agenda this evening is consideration of Resolution 07122101, which is the Cedar Cove Minor Subdivision. And Donovan, I believe you're also walking us through this one.
Certainly. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to present the minor subdivision for property that's located at the intersection of Broadway Avenue West and then 132nd Street. It's located, as I mentioned, just a little west of the previous application. And what's proposed is 3 lots. And these are within the MXR1 zoning district. They comply with the minimum area and width standards for lots in this zoning district. Just to zero in a little more on this property, it's approximately 2.7 acres. And it is currently vacant. As this was proposed to staff, there's some concern about the depth of the sanitary sewer line. If I turn on the sanitary sewer line in green, you can see it is extended on 232nd Street with water being blue with that, the fire hydrant shown there. However, this is at the end of the line, so that it means everything's flowing eastward, and so this is the shallowest depth of the line. And at this point, this far western edge of the sewer line, it's at a depth that the city would not construct currently. And thus the depth of the sewer line proposed for lot 1 is less than the city standard, which is about 7.5 to 8 feet. What's proposed is approximately it was measured as 6.2, and that's what the information I had at the Plan Commission. And though I showed Ryan some of the information that was submitted that's also before you in paper form from the Mr. Smith engineer. And Ryan believes now that, or sees now, he calculates that the invert of the service pipe coming into the main pipe will have 5.6 feet of cover. That's 5.6 feet of earth above it, which is a particular concern because that is in the road. That's uninsulated due to the fact it gets plowed in the winter and there's not a mantle of snow acting as insulation from the more severe, atmospheric cold. And he says that if the road is 2% cross slope, which is your minimum grade to get the sewage to flow, if the road is 2% cross slope, if the road is 2% cross slope off to the side and it's 22 feet wide, then the service pipe is installed at 2%, that minimum grade. Then on the edge of the pavement, I calculate the service pipe invert will have 5.2 feet of cover. And so this is where the city really wants around 7.5 to 8 feet, or maybe 7.5 at that edge of that edge of the road, because the pipe in this case is underneath the crown of the road, the highest point. And also, he does, Ryan does note that this discussion with the driveway simply, he recommends that the slope be less than the proposed 7%, not a requirement. In the Plan Commission review of this on June 28th, we discussed some of the non-conforming situations in the city. Planning Commission both looked at had some concerns about the pipes freezing. I noted there's places in the city where Public Works is called out regularly to thaw out frozen pipes. Also was noted that private companies also do that when the service lines are on private land, and this isn't something the city wants to replicate in other situations, and even a situation now when we feel like we know better not to repeat that. And unfortunately, Ryan's not here this evening to be able to describe that with more depth. We do have the Public Works Director who does go on site to do that. Perhaps he can explain some more detail with some follow-up questions. The Plan Commission motion that was approved by 3-2 was to approve the minor subdivision. And I have here the conditions that it's on your screen. The conditions for approval were the successful completion of a lot line adjustment application, which would increase the size of the lot on the east side. Satisfaction of the technical requirements for completing service for an insulated sewer line at a minimum of 6 feet deep. Minor subdivision agreement that would be executed in conjunction with the city attorney and city council. An easement agreement that would be similarly executed. Any other conditions of the city engineer, city council, and/or Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District. I'll note that one of the city engineer's comments was that the city would not accept a regional stormwater pond to serve these 3 lots due to the size of it just not being very efficient and city not wanting to accept that. Also, I'll note that if there was public infrastructure created, it would have to be under a major subdivision application, not a minor subdivision application, since no new public infrastructure can be created with a minor subdivision application. And so what you have before you in your packet, and also before you on paper, is 2 resolutions. There is a resolution for approval here, which kind of shows the Plan Commission recommendation, and then goes through findings of fact, and then states that the council hereby approves this. Also in your packet in paper form before you is a resolution denying the minor subdivision with the finding, which is the staff recommendation, which is the subdivision does not conform to the minimum city standards for adequate sewer depth on one of the proposed lots. If I'd had my druthers with the application, and we did have multiple conversations with Mr. Smith, I would like to have had the situation be that the Plan Commission could have approved 2 lots and done it through that, but the way the applications come forward, we can't really sculpt them as the Plan Commission can anyways. And so it's either up or down motion, approving or denying. And so there was in the end, there was the approval, motion passed, recommendation by Planning Commission, and the staff recommendation is to deny the application due to inadequate sewer depth for the western lot, known as lot 1. With that, I'm happy to take any questions from City Council.
What was the depth of the sewers for the other 2 lots, 2 and 3?
They are, there's no staff concern for those. One is 7.5 and,
So they're somewhat over 7 feet is what you're saying.
yeah. The way the road slopes down, the land also slopes down where where the proposed houses are. And so it's just a case where there's, basically inadequate public utilities to serve all 3 lots. And that's a situation we find in many cases where there's not city utilities extended to a property. And we saw that, for instance, right by Tannersbrook with that proposed.
But is there an invert, excuse me, supplied for that lot?
Sorry? There's no service line supplied. And actually,
Okay.
I don't know the circumstance, but the property that Ms. Novak owns just to the east of this
Mhm.
is not served by public sewer at all either. For whatever reason, it wasn't connected. But that's kind of what, Mr. Smith has proposed is part of this, because there's also a lot line adjustment that would be involved with her if the minor subdivision was approved, where, the house at 4535, 232nd Street, Ms. Novak's house, would be, hooked up to public utilities.
So the real issue is the part that's in the street. Because that's what the city would be responsible for. Is that true?
The homeowner, the property owner is responsible for everything from the main to the house.
Okay, so is there anything we can do to make it work as long as they're gonna have it dug up? Can it be insulated or worked out that way somehow? I've seen that done in the past, is what reason I'm bringing it up.
Yep, I guess the public works concern, and like Ryan's not here engineering wise, but public works concern, we just approved a $2.1 million project on North Shore Circle to correct the same issue. We're relaying, a half mile of pipe and correcting 50 services because of the same issue, that they're all too shallow and they're freezing every winter. And, that's public work, even though it's not our service and not our responsibility, it kind of is our responsibility because we're the ones who get the phone calls and we're the ones who installed the line too shallow to begin with, so it's, it's of my opinion that, that's why we have the standards and that's why you have that depth. So you get below the frost line to not have it freeze. And like I said, that we're spending $2 million correcting a whole area that was done.
Years ago.
There wasn't these engineering standards when they put that in, but that's why we have these standards now, is to avoid situations like that. And to Donovan's point, that last manhole section on 232nd would have never been installed as our engineering standards now. We don't have enough cover over the main, either that road would have had to get built up or it would have been eliminated. So that's the concern on public works side. I mean, even though it's technically not our problem, if it freezes, it's still, we allow it to go in, so it's one of those deal. That's my 2 cents on that.
Well, go ahead. I was kind of curious about that because I've seen it done before and where it's worked out. I'm sure that when that sewer line was put in there, they never did any kind of insulating or thinking about that because of the flowage and the fact that sewers basically are empty all the time until you flush a bunch of water down and it's moving through and it a little less likely of it to freeze if it's installed properly. So I'm just trying to get that straight in my mind and what we should do here. I know in the street, 5 or 6 feet isn't adequate, but certainly in a yard, if it's not going under a driveway or something, it probably would be okay.
Yeah, in any yard, you can get away with it, just with the snow cover and that depth, but once you start getting to the road, that's where, depending on the traffic on that road, how far do you beat that frost down? I mean, a couple years ago, it was 6 feet down in the ground, which would have been freezing the, freezing the line, so. I guess I get both sides of it, it's, you can probably get away with it, but then at the same time, why do we have standards too? I mean, it's how do you want to weigh that?
Well, what I'm hearing is that there'd be more trouble in the street there would be in the yard because of the fact that you're at the end of the line so you don't have a constant flow going through there.
And a lot of times that's where you run into your freezing. If you say you don't have a perfectly straight main line, you know, as years go on, you get your bellies and your stuff in that line. Well, if that belly happens to be close where that service is, that's how you start freezing it backwards. Your invert maybe have an inch of standing water in it already just because of the belly and the line, and then it just works itself back.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Questions, feedback items? I guess I had more of a tactical question. So I recognize the application is for the 3 lots or the 3 parcels, and we have to, as Donovan needs to say, an up or down vote based on the application. If we were to deny tonight, is there anything in that denial that prohibits the applicant from reapplying for the 2 lots that don't have this issue with depth of sewer? I just want to make sure that there's still an open door for another application if for some reason we were to deny tonight.
Yeah, good question. There are some applications, CUP, I think, is for instance, where you have to wait basically a year cooling off period.
Yeah.
I don't believe there is one for a minor subdivision.
Okay. But just for clarity and my own, just making sure, we have to either approve or deny based on the full application. We're not able to do a partial approval, for example.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay, thank you. Council, other questions or feedback items? Again, you have before you 2 draft resolutions that staff has prepared, depending on which direction you would like to go. Yes, I will just maybe kick off some discussion here. I have concern, we have standards for a reason. I have concerns without a demonstrated exception to that standard that staff is comfortable with. I'm not seeing information that makes me comfortable in moving ahead. I can imagine, and there's some discussion of different alternatives that could work, but I'm not hearing or seeing a staff support of a direct line of this is something that everyone is comfortable with and in agreement. And in absence of that, I just have concerns over creating future challenges that, to Dave's point, although we may not be responsible for some sections of that infrastructure, certainly there's a public perception that we've approved a project and that we've allowed it, and there is that implied responsibility that gives me some concern. So for that reason, my recommendation would be to deny, but again, I'm open to conversation, and if there's another alternative path forward, I'm happy to hear it. I guess maybe to kick off conversation, I would move that we deny the application with the resolution 07-122101 would be my motion. And denial based, as staff indicates, around lack of compliance of utility depth.
I'll second on, just for the sake of argument here a little bit.
We have a motion and a second, and open it up, happy to open up for further discussion.
I would be a little more hesitant to deny it if that was not the end of that main line. So you had a constant flow going through there, or a pretty constant flow anyways, because that creates warmth and all that kind of stuff. And I've seen these systems work, but on the end of the line like that, it is an issue. So having looked at this thing and kind of sweated over it, the whole thing, my second to the motion does stand.
Any further discussion, questions?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I agree with you, Mayor Bain, that, you know, we have standards for a reason. And when we start deviating from those standards, it's going to create some additional problems for us down the road. So.
Mayor Bain, and I would just add, if I feel comfortable that there's still an open door for the applicant to come back with the other 2 lots. So.
Very good. With that, I'll call a vote. All of those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and motion carried. To the applicant, I do hope we see you back. With that, we will close out the action portion of our agenda and move into a discussion, more of a workshop format. This is going to be informal discussion. This is a working session of council. Anything that is discussed tonight will, any decisions that might be made or any, there will be no decisions made. It's just a discussion only. Any topics would come to council for further vote in a future meeting. And with that, we will open it up to our 2022 budget priority discussion and strategic priorities. Patrick, do you want to kick off our conversation?
Yes, in your packet tonight, there's just an outline of some of the issues and some of the things that we need to start to consider for the 2022 budget. We are still working on the long-term financial plan. Again, not to make excuses, but it's been a lot more challenging than we first thought it was going to be, so it's taking a little longer time. We will probably extend that out from a 10-year plan to a 20-year plan because the needs are so great, so that's the change. In addition, we will be coming back to council shortly with a staffing recommendations and outline of what we see for the next 20 years of staffing, understanding that really only the first 5 years are the pertinent ones and that items change. So we'll be back to the council with that in a very short time. But I think at this point, the council needs to consider or give us some guidance on what we should be placing in the budget this year and what you're comfortable with or not comfortable with. As I said in the memo, the budget is your #1 policy document. That's, you put your money where your mouth is. That's the most important policy that you have and always will have. So you should be considering where you're comfortable with property tax rates, if at all. We have utility rates in place that are set to increase to support the utilities and try to continue to keep up with or catch up with the needs of those three areas. You all have heard as I that the streets need to be improved. Again, part of the long-term plan. Do you want us to consider accelerating that this year? Issue some debt temporarily at least, or at least for this season, to try to address some of those immediate situations. On the other hand, we also have other needs with parks and trails and buildings that are needed of attention. How are we going to fund those? Again, a lot of this will be tried to be addressed in the long-term plan, but do you want to take any immediate action on those? You all have to know, and you read the newspapers or listen to the radio, the rates on bonding is still low, really low, historically low still. Ticked up a little bit, but still within good ranges that you should consider it as an alternative. And if you want to center that discussion around what that number is for, if you want to do it immediately, we can have that discussion. We can come back with a recommendation. But knowing that right now it's low, it'll probably stay low for a while, at least through the end of the year, probably into next year, but sooner or later they will go up. We've talked about the Castlewood Golf Course. We've begun discussions at the Parks, Lakes, and Trails about the building that proposed and what kind of uses that building will have, not only for the golf course, but for long-term recreational uses. So that's at the Parks and Lakes and Trails. That has no funding. As if you recall, we do have a building sitting there waiting to be built. We are having an issue, as most of the United States is, with jobs and employment. While we hire summer help, we're having difficulties getting summer help. Seems that there's either not a lot of interest or the competition for dollar per hour is higher. You can go down to the local McDonald's or something, or Quick Trip is, you can $15 an hour, $18 an hour overnight. So in next year's budget, we'll be recommending a change in the part-time seasonal wage rate just to keep up and get applicants. We're okay with the public works, but some of the park summer help with the rangers and things are having a very difficult time finding those people. As you all know, we have 3 contracts that are supposed to be negotiated this year. we'll be addressing that at the next meeting on the 16th. We have our labor attorney, Susan Hanson, coming in to address that. We'll talk about what you feel or what's good, bad, or where you want us to go on that. So, but that's a closed session discussion that we'll have.
Patrick, are there 3 contracts we're?
Yes, we have
Mhm.
AFSCME, we
Okay.
have MAPE, and we have the 49ers, which is the Public Works Unit. And then next year, we'll have the 2 police units, the police sergeants and the patrol. And historically, once one is set, that kind of guides us for the rest of the way. At the last meeting, we had a presentation from a community organization. There was some discussion about, do we want to continue or increase the helps in that area? So that's something you should consider if you want to consider those kind of items. We've talked about code enforcement. We will come back to you again with a code enforcement plan as soon as we possibly can regarding how we're going to do that, hopefully without having to add additional staff. I already said about the positions that we're going to come back with a long-term look at positions and make our recommendations. Those do include police positions, public works positions, and administrative positions. So again, that's going to be a 20-year look, but the first 5 years are what's good there. And as like a capital plan, the times change, things change. You need to adapt. So those kind of plans, even the long-term financial plan, is only good for a little bit. So you have to keep updating those. So we'll continue into that. Mentioned in the EDA mentioned today regarding, do we have enough people working for the EDA, economic development? Are we in need of an economic development position? We will discuss that. We haven't discussed that internally yet, but we will discuss that. We also have the downtown committees working on the downtown plan. And what kind of funds will be needed in 2022 to address that plan. We believe that it'll be done, the plan will be presented first or second quarter of 22, and there should be some initial expenditures on what's the next step. I mean, if it's a huge plan, which it should be, we won't be able to address them all, but we should be starting to take steps in making that plan work and putting out some of the things we need to do. And finally, as the memo says, is that we have approximately $2.1 million coming from the federal government regarding the relief. The standards, unlike the CARES Act, the standards are much more clear and direct, so we understand those better. And it has a large emphasis on infrastructure for water, sewer, stormwater. It does address other economic help as far as businesses go, but in my opinion, I think the county and the state is going to cover a lot of those. $2.1 million won't get us far in infrastructure, but we discussed tonight in the EDA the possibility that we completed the downtown sewer study, and we know that there's an issue or two there that maybe that's the best way to address that. Maybe we use those funds to address that. Staff internally will take a look and see what the priorities are. Again, when you start getting into construction, $2 million goes pretty quick, so we won't be able to you won't see major paved with gold streets anywhere, but it'll at least get us somewhere. I think that's good use of the money. So the assistance money has to be, we have a long timetable. We have to spend it by December 31st of 2024. So we do have some time to plan, prioritize, and then execute whatever that's going to be. Other than that, the program is that the department heads are formulating their budget currently. Any discussion tonight we will take into consideration and present the council late August, probably, a proposed 2022 budget. The budget doesn't have to be adopted until December, as you most know, but we have to set a preliminary levy in September. So we will have discussions around what that levy is going to be. And we cannot raise the levy once we set it in September, but we can lower it if we have to. So if we make it a higher levy, we'll try to lower it if that's possible. But we have to come to some kind of a number in September. So we will do that once our discussion is completed in August and September. So I'll stop now and ask if there's any questions of what I've said, and then open it up to you for discussion.
Council, any broad questions, or I guess maybe any broad questions or anything at kind of an overall general level? Otherwise, I would say maybe let's walk through the bullet points that are in the document that Patrick just kind of walked through one by one and give feedback individually. But before we start that, any kind of global items, we'll have an opportunity at the end to maybe anything that's not on your list, or anything that's on your list that we haven't already talked about, to then kind of have open discussion. But before we start walking through that, any other things to set through? So with that, maybe just kind of guiding through Patrick's list, I'm open to, and just suggested items on the list. Maybe let's just follow that order. Property tax levy, what, if any, should be property tax increase? Any general feedback at this point? I'll just open it up first.
And just for reference, your property tax rate has been pretty flat as far as the rate goes versus the increase in the value of property in the city. So you've been hovering around 39 and 40%, so we've been trying to keep that there. So there is, again, not that I'm suggesting raising the heck out of the property tax, but there's an ability for us to keep that level straight, as flat as we can, based on the increase in the value of the city's property. So not that it's not an impact, but it's a minimal impact when you compare it to, raising things 10% or 20%. A 5% increase, I believe, off the top of my head, was like $500,000, or I forget what last year's was. But even if we did that, it still keeps that rate at right around 40%, 39, 40%. So.
Yeah, I tend to, I tend to look at this first bullet and say, what do we need? What's the baseline?
Or ask me at the end, and is it
Yeah.
reasonable?
That-
Yeah.
That's an end question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is. It's just in there because that's something you should be thinking
Right.
about, particularly when we talk about guidance with union contracts. Yeah, we'll let you know what we need shortly. I guarantee you we'll let you know what we need. And we try to be as conservative as you are and try not to do crazy things. And that's why I think we're coming back with staffing plans, and we've extended now what we believe the financial plan is going to be longer, instead of, you all saw the impact of a 10-year plan kind of when it was presented, and it's a large hill to climb. So regrouping on all that. So yeah, it is an end game. So we will come back and make that suggestion soon, at the end of August.
And I just, I think we have revenue limitations, right? We're limited in the ways that we can generate revenue, and that's why we've been trying to explore multiple options to generate some additional revenue to get this done, including, a city tax, for example. So I think I'd like to take a look at that comprehensive picture again, as we enter into this, and, what would that end game look like? What would that end scenario look like potentially?
That's fine. And you're absolutely correct. We, as cities right now, we are limited to what we can raise in revenue, basically fees, and the property taxes are really our sole largest revenue that we have, and that's really what we have to depend on. We have a tax, not a tax, but we have a tax that we put on telecommunications and things like that. Franchise fees, thank you. That goes solely to road rehabilitation. That's how you've been, funding your roads at $700,000 a year, and $700,000 a year for roads is not a lot of money in this day and age. So, I sound like a broken record, but we're still trying to figure out a way to catch up from past. So,
Right.
So we will come with a plan, which again is the budget is your plan. It's your property. It's your policy document that we will come back at the end of August and make a recommendation, and then give you guys time to fiddle with it all. So.
Next item on the list is just utility rates. Any immediate feedback items specific to utility rates?
We will again review the utility rates before we get too far down the line and see if we're still on track with what we need to be. The utility rates were put in place to fund the improvements that we need to make, particularly in the water and the sewer. As you may recall, next year we're going to do a number of lift stations that will need some money. We're going to match the $1.7 million we got from the state for that, but we're trying to again be conservative with those rates, but having to fund improvements so that you have water when you turn the faucet on, and when you flush the toilet, it goes somewhere, so.
I know we've had to take some tough rate action in the last couple of years, but that was to catch up, and I don't want us to be in that position again. So I would recommend we don't take the foot off the gas, and that we just wait. Hopefully it's not an incremental catch-up rate again this year, but I think we need to make sure we're keeping an eye on what's sufficient to keep those funds healthy. So
I would recommend a smooth line
Yes.
instead of a this and then this and then
I'd
this.
be interested to see, as part of the future discussion on the rates we've taken, just where are we? Are we at a spot where I don't expect we're going to see a decrease, but are we able to start plateauing?
I think
and-
we're starting to smooth out. If I recall the rate structure, I don't have that in front of me, but I think we are starting to smooth out. I won't quote you the rate, but we're almost there, I think.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yes, smaller incremental, kind of steady changes versus, hold, and then have to have a major increase.
Is there an opportunity, so with some of the relief dollars coming specific for infrastructure, are we expecting some of that to be able to be used for sewer and water? And is there potentially some rate relief there, or project catch-up?
It's a question I asked already to Ellers. Yes, we will look at using that for sewer and water or stormwater, those three areas.
Okay.
Whether that significantly will alter the rate structure, I doubt it, but we'll look and see. Because, for example, you have next 25, you have a water tower that needs to be built for $2 million. One scenario would say, well, we build it now, we don't have to raise the rates later. But we'll look at those kind of things and see if there's any relief, or at least look at the rates and see if, for example, if it's a 5% rate, can it be a 3.5% rate? We will look at those kind of scenarios. It may take us a little bit past August to do some of that rate work, but we will take that into consideration.
That is not general fund, so that can
Correct.
be fourth quarter project work.
Correct. That is not general fund. The levy is mostly general fund and economic development for the most part. So,
Thank you. Other utility feedback at this point? All right, keep moving down our list. Street improvements. Overall feedback on street improvements overall,
I have,
specific items.
Mayor Bain, a little bit of feedback. As I was reading through the memo, I was also thinking about what do we hear the most from, or what is the issue we hear the most? And besides code enforcement, it's roads. I'm not at a point to say whether that means issue debt or fees, but I think it's something we should definitely consider. But I think also people need to be aware and enforce, like if they want nice roads, we also have to be able to find a way to pay for them too.
yeah, I'm a conservative when it comes to debt. However, the way we have funded roads in the city is not a good way to do it. Roads are a 20 to 30-year investment, so issuing debt for 10 to 30 years, or 20 years, I should say, the theory is that you spread that debt across those number of years, the people who use it. So new residents, old residents, as you turn over, those people are still paying for that debt, so they're paying for that roads. We probably have close to, I think it was $35 million in road improvements we need to do. And we do it, we get there, and we have to start. That only gets us to an average of 5 or 6 or something like that. We continue. So it's kind of a blend. We really have to look at a blend when we talk about roads of debt and long-term financing. We can do debt until we're blue in the face, but it should be a hybrid. It should be debt and long-term financing, and finding a way to finance your roads. And until just 2 years ago, we put no property tax dollars into roads, 0. And right now, I think it's $100,000 a road in property tax, which gets you maybe probably 100 feet of road, I would think. Something.
Well, and that goes back to my, if people, I think they assumed we covered that in property taxes, and we don't. So if we want nice roads, we have to be prepared to pay for nice roads.
And that's why debt is a way to catch up at debt, again, is a way to finance roads so that everybody pays them, that uses them in the long run, and can help us at least get closer while we find a way to figure out how we're going to finance them in the long run. It's a patch, really. And you have a lot of communities that just use debt for roads, period, and it's just part of the operating, expenses on an annual basis, and they have it fall off and they start another one. So, and that's a way to do it, but I would rather see us do some debt and then try to figure out what the long-term plan is to fund them.
Is there a way to understand the, because I know we had a lengthy conversation about the city sales tax being used for road improvement. Is there a way to kind of quantify that impact in those different scenarios? So we've got the city sales tax, which is being utilized, being paid by folks that pay in, some that are outside of this community that are then supporting our roads, or bonding, and the different, do you know where I'm going with that? I mean, I don't know if there's a way to take a look at those scenarios.
Yeah, so what, let me see if I can understand what you said here. So you're looking at if we use straight property tax or debt versus what we would do if we had a sales tax, and how that would mix back off of each other. And
Yeah,
if a sales tax was here, would it help us or reduce the need to do debt or financing through the other way? Or would we do, I think that's what you're talking about.
No, I think what I'm looking for is, we would, those folks that are shopping in this community that don't live in this community, obviously if we bond, the impact is to the residents of this community.
Right.
But if we were to go a sales tax direction, for example, and target those dollars to our road improvement, I don't know if there's a way to quantify that impact of that sales tax on our residents versus what they would be paying if we bonded.
And I think the way to look at that is, let's say you bonded for $1 million and you put it on the property tax or debt, whichever you want to choose. 100% gets paid by your residents.
Right.
If you take that saved $1 million and you pay for it through the sales tax, I believe the number was 35%. So 60, I think it was 55 to 60% is paid by your residents. So 60, basically a 60-40. So 40, they only get 60% of the impact. So $600,000 instead of $1 million.
Versus the full million.
I know it's real rough, but I think that was
Okay.
close to what the number was.
As the conversation on the 10-year plans, just my personal feedback on that point, the 10-year conversation, as the conversation on the 10-year plan kind of continues, I encourage us to continue to look at that. I think because the timeline of doing something on the sales tax side is quite extensive, I think as we think about what needs to happen in the next, next year for sure for the budget, and then, a couple of years afterwards, I think there's a need for potentially both, right? Where we've identified a bundle of projects that we might bond for as part of, you look at the list and it's a list of things that just isn't getting done. And I'll just throw an example, classic example of North Shore Trail, for example, right? Of just a tough nut to crack. Putting that on to some sort of a bond package, but then also I think we need to continue to and have the discipline to up the general fund contribution to that road fund, because it was certainly painful to go from zero to something, and I think we need to continue to increase that. So at some point, we aren't a community that typically, we're a pretty debt shy community from my perspective, and so the only way to be debt shy is that you fund it in advance. I think we need to continue to do that, but I think we're in this, deficit, project deficit, that we need to keep that moving. And I think bundling some infrastructure projects together into it, some sort of a debt issue is something we probably should be considering, putting in the horizon for 2022.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct that we need to keep our eye on increasing the property tax. And when it comes to a sales tax, is that a good idea? What should be in it? However, that is a unknown based because of I don't think there'd be the problem getting it through legislature. I think it's the referendum side that's the problem. That's the crapshoot, basically. So you want to build that into the plan, but knowing that that may never happen.
And I think, but I recognize that certainly, and I think a big reason is people just don't understand it.
Right.
They don't understand what the goal of that would be.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do on that before we even get to that
There would be a lot of communication that would need to occur and that's kind of why I was going there with those various scenarios, so that you can sort of present, this is what it would look like here, this is what it would look like here. And I don't know if we can capture that in a way that makes sense.
That is a challenge to try to put that variable in place, but and plus with the sales tax, there may be other demands besides roads. I mentioned before, you're currently doing a downtown plan that probably will take you to need major infrastructure, building improvements, probably a lot of money. And is that a use for sales tax instead? I mean, so we know there's things coming down the road, but we have to focus right now on the infrastructure the way it is now. And I think we've captured the water and the sewer and storm pretty well. I think we're on that road to fix, but buildings and parks and roads are all, we need attention.
I agree with Mayor Bain. I think we can have a multifaceted approach.
Absolutely, and that's what, and any good financial plan gives you a multifaceted approach, and that's why we mentioned, I mean, I know we got a little heat from the sales tax discussion, but we need to have those discussions. We need to have the discussions on continuing to raise the property tax level every year. We need to have the discussions on debt, and we need to have any other revenues that we have a chance to gain, find them, because we just are so limited on the amount of revenue that we can put towards roads or have traditionally put towards roads.
And Councilmember Munson's point is worth repeating. The community thinks that general fund revenue is going to roads today, and for the most part, that is, with the exception of $100,000, that's just not the case. So I think that is just a public perception that we just need to get over of, okay, that is the case, and if you want more roads projects, how are we going to pay for that?
Yeah, and I think some communication around that, because when you follow the social media, common comment is, well, we pay for this in our taxes, we should have nice roads, and it's like, actually, you don't really.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do right now, we're in the process of trying to compare ourselves to other communities, and how gathering that information now and trying to say, okay, here's our traditional communities we compared ourselves to, here's some expanded communities, 15 to 25,000 population, and seeing where we stack up as far as property tax, how much we pay versus others, how many police officers we have, how many other staff members we have, how many miles of roads we have, things like that. We're trying to gather that information, hopefully, to be able to give you that information as we go along. So that's a work in progress. So hopefully we'll finish that up shortly, as well as the
and I think
staffing.
We really need to tell that story.
We do.
It's not, stats are great, but you do need to paint a picture for people. So
and that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to give them say, okay, here's the nut to crack, which we've gone through and said we need $35 million in road improvements. And we have park plans that we've got now more and more people wanting parks and trails. I mean, the strategic plan identified that that's important to this community, and that's what people want, and that's what people may be moving here for. And the lakes, the lake is a big factor that we don't really do a lot with. So, we have to tell that story. We have to figure out where all that and what the needs are. And that's a long process. We're continuing, but we'll get there. It's just a matter of trudging through it all. So.
I think part of that argument has to be, well, what do you suggest?
It is.
Seriously,
It really
you got to have public comment on this thing, and maybe there's some ideas out there, but $35 million issue is a big deal. And there's never enough money for roads.
Yeah,
Ever.
I wouldn't suggest we do $35 million by any stretch of the imagination, but
Yeah.
that's what we need. I mean, if you want your roads to be 6 or better, and that's average, you need $35 million.
I think it's just a really good idea, and I agree that we need to get that communication out there that here's what we need, and here's the possibilities that we could make it work.
Even some infographics or something for folks who aren't going
Yeah,
to read it,
'cause-
but just something to look at, just to
Because the
show.
property tax thing is and then when somebody brings up the sales tax without knowing what's going on, it's, that what I hear is over my dead body kind of thing, you know? And, but so much of it is not understanding even how the process works.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, we need to do that. I mean, again, it's just putting all this package together.
Well, and if I said to the members of my community, I need $1 million for road improvement, and I have a way that you only have to pay $600,000 of that.
It is
Pretty good
about the story. When it comes
investment.
to, I mean, just like schools, when it comes to a referendum, it's about the story. And schools are really good at doing that. We need to be as good if we're going to do a sales tax referendum. So, but that's 2 to 3 years out, so.
Good segue to our next topic, or the next bullet point, which is debt. Other than what we've just talked about related to debt, there's some discussion in the bullet point related to parks, trails, buildings in need of attention. Specific.
And if you, one suggestion I would have is for us to come to you with a package for debt with the budget, saying, here's the package, here's what we believe the package should be for 2021, and it will buy us this. I don't think we need to do debt, well, water and sewer do debt, but that's independent, so that's rate, but general property tax supported debt, we need to come to the package on what's included with that, how many miles of roads are we going to do? We have plans for parks that have been through a public process and want to be improved that we probably should do. And we need to, in long term, we need to talk about buildings and keeping our buildings sound. And we really haven't, for building we sit in, really hasn't had any funds appropriated for keeping maintenance and keeping the roofing and when that needs to happen and all of that. We have a public works facility that needs really bad attention. I mean, it needs attention, that we shouldn't be housing people there. We can't park all the trucks there. We've scheduled that in a plan to 2025, but that'll be a different bond issue in a second, but that needs to happen. So while we don't have a lot of buildings, we need to pay attention to the ones we have and plan for the ones we need, so.
Mayor Bain, I just have a quick question. I don't know if this is the time to ask it or not, so if it's not, just
Sure.
tell me. So when I see Parks, Trail, and Lakes, I know last year the Forest Lake Association came and presented, and we said it'd be best to come earlier in, when we start talking about this. Have they gone to
I believe
Parks,
they
Lakes, and
have
Trails?
approached Parks and Trails. I think Parks and Trails on Wednesday or Tuesday, tomorrow,
Okay.
Wednesday, I have to forget the date, are having a budget workshop of their own.
Okay,
So hopefully that's included. We'll check back with Jamie, but they should be included
okay.
because we also do need to address some of the lake issues, but we
Yeah.
can't continue to address them in October of every year when pretty much the levy's been set. And
Right,
that's why
that's-
we're trying to push it towards now
Right.
and the Parks and Trails. So the Parks and Trails becomes the conduit and the decision, at least the recommendation body to the council and to the staff on what goes in and what goes out, and some kind of a long-term plan. I've worked with Jamie to kind of start to work on that as well. So, but yes, the answer is yes, they will.
Got
yes,
it,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
I rambled.
They're on my list as well.
They are, okay, I just want to make sure we didn't miss it this year, or it wasn't too late, or,
Not too late. That's why we're starting in July.
So what are the current bonding rates? And have we had like any, I know every now and again, Ellers does a kind of an economic outlook, or short-term economic outlook, just to try to help us better understand where's the economy headed. And,
Yeah.
I don't know if we've, if that's on on the list.
Yeah, the last conversation, we do a couple of things with Ellers. We do, first of all, we look at all our bonds and say, like we did 2 years ago, whenever we refinanced this building bonds and we saved $1 million some odd dollars. So we go over our bonding structure every year and to see if there's an opportunity for that. Well, right now there's not. There may be an opportunity next year to do some refinancing, but right now it doesn't make any sense. The last market review that I saw came out 3 weeks ago. Economy's good, it's getting hot. Interest rates are predicted to stay low for now. The Fed is being very, very aggressive in what they're doing. So I would assume that, and I haven't seen any recently published rates, but I think they're still below 2. Maybe in the high ones, but below 2. And if you can get money for 2% or less, that's a big deal. And that's not a lot to pay for debt, especially when, like I said, the infrastructure repairs are a 20 to 30 year repair, and that debt will then be structured out that far so that the residents who move in when maybe you or I or whoever is long gone will also assume the expense for those roads. But yeah, I think they're under 2 still. Maybe if they're not, they're really low too. So still, I mean, it's like mortgage rates that keep going down, but the market's really hot. They've had a couple, had a good day yesterday, and so I think the rates will stay really low.
I know there's been a lot of buzz about inflation, and there's a sweet spot there in making a move on something. So, just was curious if they had any perspective.
I would recommend that you make that move sooner than later, with inflationary pressures that may come as the economy heats up, if the Fed has to take action. The other thing with debt this year is, if you recall, we did a conduit financing this year with the school. And so that made us non-bond qualified, which means really it gives us a little higher interest rate. However, in the contract for conduit financing, if you recall, if we were to issue debt this year, the school is obligated, and I think has escrowed the money, to pay us whatever the cost of the bond sale would be on a non-qualified basis, so that we could calculate the difference between a qualified issue versus a non-qualified issue. They would pay us that difference. So that's something else that we want to consider, and why we should consider bonding before the end of this year.
Was that a buy down?
No, it's not a buy down. It's just what the school, when we did the bond financing, the school was so big that it took us out of bank qualification. So if we wanted to issue debt this year, we would have a higher interest rate because we could not be considered bank qualified. They have promised to make up the difference if we bond between what we would get the interest rate or bank qualified versus non-bank qualified. They just pay us. It's just a revenue that let's just say it's $100,000 difference and they'd pay us on it. Well, we throw that into the capital plan because it's really a one-time revenue and should be used as one-time expense. So it's just a payment by the school to make up for what we may have lost in a better interest rate.
Other feedback items specific to, we're on this bullet points, but that is specific to
And if there is no objection, we will come back to the council with a package of possibly a bond for you to review. Not that you should do it or not do it. I think we should come back with a package and say, here's what we think you might want to consider.
I'm personally just really interested in what comes out of the conversation on parks related to, priorities and their top priorities. If they are at a point of a project that they think is ready for that type of a consideration, I'm open to it. But I also know that there's been a lot of discussion on a lot of different, different park assets, and so I'm just not sure where they are at point of maturity of being close to think about funding a project.
Yeah, and what we've talked about with Jamie, and I'm sure she's talked about parks, but I forget the name of the park that we did the master plan on and had a public hearing.
Belts Park.
Belts Park. That's ready to go. That's one that might be in their top priority. I mean, they've done all the work for it. They had the public information system input and things like that. So that's ready to go. But they're also looking at, we're trying to get them on a level where when should we replace each swing set? When should we replace each set of playground equipment? That's more of a maintenance issue, and we'll figure out how to finance that, whether it's in park dedication fees, whether it's a bond, but I think we'll see what they say this week and what their possible priorities are.
I'd be interested in taking a look at belts because, you know, the Rotary's sitting on some funds there for us too, and they've been sitting on those funds
I
for
didn't
quite
know
some
that.
time.
Oh, okay.
So they did some fundraising.
Well, if there's some matching funds, then you should really consider doing that sooner than later, because those have a tendency, if you don't use them, to kind of disappear.
I feel like we've been a little bit on moving the goalpost with them though, and that's on us in that we've added Castlewood to their play and senior center, and we've just done a lot of, like, we've added a lot of programming that I can appreciate that they kind of want to take a pause of, or at least a reassessment of, is belt still our top priority given what else has come on? So I look forward to hearing, and maybe that's time for a joint workshop, us and them, as we're kind of heading, you know, rounding the corner into August, September. I'd be open to that as well. Which is a good segue to Castlewood Golf Course is the next particular bullet point on the list.
Castlewood Golf Course, we all know the issue with the clubhouse, and I'll never, ever suggest that one again. However, Castlewood is also one of those situations where nothing has been done with it for years. And it's limped along. You had dedicated, you know, operator who did the best they can, but, you know, that's why we don't have fences along Harrow anymore. That's why we had we need to have a long-term capital plan for the golf course, no matter if we have an operator or not. There's some major capital things that we should always think about having. We do have the clubhouse building sitting, waiting to be constructed. I think we should construct it and at least put it up and then figure out how to finish it off inside. It doesn't have to be right away. It can be kind of a process that when we find time, we can finish, you know, with Public Works in the winter if it's not snowing or something. One recommendation is we place a $1 surcharge for every round of golf to start to pay for some of these capital improvements. It's a minor increase that would generate minor, you know, at least some decent money. That we had to do all the sand traps this year, it might cover something like that, or it may cover up new fencing, but we need to start to address the capital improvements. And while the building is an issue, it's more than the building. It's you know, the irrigation system is going to need probably major attention one day. Sand traps, the clubhouse, the whatever the case may be, and that's not the operator's responsibilities. I mean, it's not the operator's responsibilities to fix or maintain the irrigation system. It's ours. It's not their. We have a parking lot now that we may have to help maintain based on our agreements. So that's in here just to make sure that it's not forgotten, and that it's an issue that we'll also have to incorporate into the budget sooner or later, or as soon as we can. Again, my recommendation is to put that building up and then try to figure out how to complete the rest, so we don't lose that building to rot and weather and things like that. So
Has the planning commission been discussing?
now that's gone first to Parks and Trails for programmatic understanding. We asked them to say, okay, if we put this up, what do you want to use the building for besides a clubhouse? Do you want winter machine golf? Do you want a place to rent where you can have birthday parties and stuff like that? Because there's not a lot of that space in town, in the city, I should say. So they've been working through that.
And,
You know,
and
and-
what,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
An interesting side note to that building, when we bought it, it's probably half the cost it would take to buy it today
Right.
because of the
That's
lumber
true.
cost alone.
Yeah, that's true.
It's amazing what happened with lumber costs in the last year or
It's
so.
insane. But yes, that's true. It would probably be double the cost right now if we bought that building right now.
Yeah,
That spot is really an eyesore.
Yeah, it is, and it will have to, and that's the decision. We have to have a decision on what we're going to do there. So do we just cover it all up and do something else with that building somewhere, or do we make that decision and go forward?
Do you have a sense of what that dollar surcharge would translate to?
You know, I was gonna ask Jamie that today and I did, but I have to look and see how many rounds of golf there were last year. I don't remember it off. I was, you know, if there's, you know, if there's 500 rounds, obviously it's 500. I just don't remember what the number was. It's not a big, you know, a dollar surcharge won't be a lot. It'll be enough to start to put some money back into the course, and with some capital improvements, we put it in where it can build up some fund balance for that. So that when irrigation comes in 10 years or 5 years, we might have enough money to at least do most of it, so. And there's a theory that the people who use the course should help pay. I mean, that's what they do with their greens fees, but with our arrangement, you know, it pays for the operator. It doesn't pay for anything else. So the green fees go to pay for the person to run the course. We need to pay for some capital improvements. It's a good public piece of property. It's a good use. People like it. We need to maintain it, and any little bit we can generate would be a good thing.
Very highly utilized.
Yes, yes. And could be even more utilized if we expand the use of that just a bit.
Right.
I mean, we're not talking about putting in a huge, big clubhouse, bar, restaurant, or anything like that. We're putting in a building where they can sell more merchandise and make more profit, so we don't have to pay them. Hopefully we're putting in a building that we might be able to have winter golf through machines that can subsidize so that, again, I repeat, sooner or later we get to where the city's not paying the operator at the end of the year. If we can get there, then any profit that we gain also from there goes back and should go back into capital, be delegated to capital improvements.
Have we looked at grants? Have we looked at grants?
Grants, not much, no.
Okay.
No, not for golf courses anyways that I've seen, but we
Okay.
can start looking. I trying to think, last time I saw a golfing kind of grant, and maybe once in a while the PGA does that, that's usually dedicated or pointed towards youth golf most of the
Right.
time, but
Right.
I don't know of many golfing grants.
They periodically, kind of like Major League Baseball,
Yeah.
have some capital
Baseball Tomorrow
grants.
Fund, yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, to improve
Yeah.
fields in a
Yeah,
community.
yeah,
and that
that's
kind of
Baseball
thing.
Tomorrow, that they give grants to improve fields or expand fields.
Right.
I'll look, to be honest with you, I haven't looked
don't
at
know.
if there's golfing grants out there.
Just an idea.
Yeah, no, it's a good one.
Moving on to our next item, seasonal maintenance. So Patrick, you kind of teed up kind of the crunch for workers and the challenges we have with our current seasonal rate. Feedback from council on this particular topic?
Hiring is a problem all over. We'll probably need to adjust that rate to try to attract a better pool. Dave does a pretty good job in getting his people, but we're having a little trouble with the rangers and stuff. So I think that we'll figure out what that wage range is going to be. Probably will have to start at $15.
I can concur with the issue there. I'm here to tell you. It's an awful situation right now, so can't find. Al knows that. I was in the dungeon for how many days, Al? 3 days down there doing price changes and things. But the point is, yeah, I don't, and is that gonna be the catch-all thing that solves all this problem? You know, is money the motivator here, you know? Who knows? But it's an issue with finding help.
So I don't think there's much of a discussion, and we're just gonna have to do it to get people to be here. I don't know what else we have to do. We can't get volunteers to cut grass, I mean, we could, but it costs you as much time and effort to manage volunteers as to pay people, so we'll just have to make that adjustment.
I'd be curious on the budget impact there.
Yeah, it won't be, going from 12 to a minimum of 15, there'll be some, but it'll be minor, because
Pretty
it's
minimal.
really a short season. It's a 10-week or 12-week season. I don't think it'll be much, but as we have in the past, when we submit the budget to you, we will highlight the changes that if that's a big budget impact, we'll highlight that.
I think just in the interest of transparency
Yeah.
with the community, so.
Next item, discussion on the, kind of circling back to the topic we had in our last meeting related to the Lake Center for Youth and Families contract. We had expressed perhaps some interest in expanding that. I think, just generally looking for feedback. I think from my perspective, to the extent that we can demonstrate, and I think Executive Director Madsen had provided some information to council after our meeting of just here's the allocation of users of their services that are Forest Lake based versus non-Forest Lake based. To the extent that we have a demonstrated high position of Forest Lake residents that are using that service, and that we're continuing to focus on the juvenile diversion programs of that sector of their programming. I'm open to considering what that looks like. I think the payoff of what we get is far beyond what we're paying for that service. I just don't know contractually how that best, I guess I'd be looking for staff feedback on how that is best demonstrated from a contract perspective, but I know that our rate has been the same for many years, and we might be at a tipping point, and it's time to reevaluate what that looks like.
I think that's a discussion with the organization.
Agreed.
I'm not sure, Rick can correct me, but I think that's a discussion we have to have with the organization, what their needs are, what their services are, and then what do we fund them and what's the appropriate level. And like any other budget challenge, it may not get to the point where they might like or can be, but at least we have to start to look at it.
Well, again, a little incremental change for Forest Lake Association last year to help with some of the work that needed to be done there. That wasn't a huge dollar amount, but it was helpful, so.
Right. Yeah. So we will look at that as well.
Code enforcement?
Yeah, we had, I just put that in there because we're working on code enforcement. We've talked a lot about code enforcement. Again, we're working internally to assign code enforcement to somebody other than Donovan, so he can do his work, other work, more timely and better basis. We think we can do that without adding positions, with just repurposing some of the positions we have. We'll come to council with that plan shortly. And just again, I'll repeat this, it's going to be more of a response program and not a seek out and destroy kind of thing. So we get enough complaints that we'll be plenty busy by the complaints. And so we'll look at that and see how that works and if that's the answer. So I think it'll be a better way to do things. I think it'll, again, repurpose positions we have, take some of the weight off of a very busy planning and zoning department, and improve how we handle things.
General comment related to positions in the organization. We've kind of generally talked about that, and I know you're going to come back with a staffing plan. Maybe let's kind of wrap up this particular portion of the conversation with EDA Downtown Committee.
And it was a very good point that made at EDA today. A member wanted to know if we are having we have enough staff and to address the EDA. Right now, we're busy with a work plan and we're busy with the downtown plan, and it's should be only getting more and more active. And should the city consider a dedicated EDA position? Dan does a lot of that work now. He gets busy with that. But do we, as a city of 20,000 people, 30 some odd square miles and growing, do we need to have somebody address and try to begin to be that person to guide the EDA, help the EDA, go out there and recruit people, identify companies, do all those things that EDA people do, economic development people do? I think it's a valid point. I didn't think about it before tonight. To be honest, in the staffing plan, we have identified that position, but it's way out in the future because we are thinking of recommending a community development director to be hired instead. And so maybe that's the person to reevaluate the need for EDA, or is that the person to take over the EDA function? So
See that as two different things. I heard
They are
that.
two
I
different
heard
things.
that as the same, but tell me more on how that.
Well, you've got a community development director position. You used to have a community development director position here, and I think you need one back. That community development person would be in charge of not only the planning and zoning and assisting and reviewing with Donovan all the plans that come in, if we get major subdivisions come in, and coordinating with Public Works and the engineer, but also we would restructure the organization a little bit to give them the building department back where they belong. And so that would be that charge. But then if we do that, are we taking away too much, and we still need an EDA position? The nice thing about having a dedicated EDA person, you would fund it through the EDA instead. And that's where you would raise their budget to match that. So we'll have to have some conversations after tonight with what the best approach is. It may be both, it may be one, it may be none, but I think we have to look at it. I agree that I think there needs to be better attention thereafter. I mean, the member tonight was right on point, really, so.
Well, and I think it just needs to be driven by our goals, you know, the direction to, I mean, what is the better fit there,
Correct.
right?
Any other, so maybe let's just broadly open it up. Any other items that are on your, kind of your individual list that we haven't already talked about, points of feedback we want to provide staff at this point to be considered?
Well, I think just a comment on that 2.1 million, you know, I water, sewer, broadband, it sounds like, you know, you may have an idea there with some of the downtown work, but I know that we have had some issues with internet service in this community too. And would this be a potential opportunity for a match or a partnership or, you know, that kind of thing?
Yeah,
So just
it's a
wanted to throw that
potential.
out.
I've been in conversations with Midco for over a year,
Mhm.
trying to get this information and identifying what needs to happen and how it needs to happen. Scandia has gone through this lately and,
Right.
and have a good plan. So it's time consuming, it's difficult, but we've been talking to them. Now that we're back in person, hopefully, we're hoping for an in-person meeting where we can sit down and have a big map in front of us and say, okay, where's service and where's service a problem or non-existent,
Mhm.
and what will it cost to put service there? And then know better what the answer is. So we're working on it, but it's a possibility. And since we have until 2024, we do have the ability to use some of that money for, hopefully, for some broadband. But again, $2 million won't go very far, even if you use it all for broadband. So I mean, you know, broadband's just like the streets. It's just has been, they put it in when they have to, or they charge the residents exorbitant amount of money to try to get it to their house. So broadband's difficult as well. But we have been talking to them for the last year with their government rep, so we're on speed dial, so we're good.
I do think there's going to be a need that isn't going to go away once
I
we're
agree.
back to normal. I mean, I think we're going to see an increased number of people working from home. You know, I know kids are going to continue doing some distance learning, and so
No, absolutely, and there's opportunities with state grants. I believe there's more federal grants now, and maybe even the county could be a partner with broadband. It's a big issue. You're absolutely correct. It's not going to go away. People will need to have high-speed service at their homes because they want to be at home, or when there's 20 inches of snow going on outside, they can stay home and still work, or if the kid's home with a fever. That's just going to be the future when we have to figure out how to get there.
All right. With that, let's transition to staff updates. Let's maybe start with Patrick, and then we'll just go around the line with Dan, and then go down the line.
I have nothing today, so if you have questions beyond what we've just talked about.
Anything else for Patrick this evening? Seeing none, let's go Dan, and then we'll just go right down the line, down to Pete, and then over to Chief Peterson.
Just one update tonight, the downtown planning feedback form is now live on the city's website. There's a web card there that says where to go to solicit feedback. I did check the feedback before this meeting, and we have a couple comments coming in on the word cloud, and I think between 13 and 25, I realized it's a big range, but I didn't actually count all the pins that were dropped. But there's quite a few pins that are on the map for the downtown location. So starting to get some feedback there, and I know we'll work on some social media posts to get that kind of blasted out to the audience there as well.
Okay, Dan, anything for Dan tonight? All right, Donovan.
Mayor, members of council, I'd like to kind of confirm what you've probably been hearing from other staff members. What we've been receiving some more development proposals, many development conversations, and even some unlikely suspects are coming forward. Not suspects, unlikely properties. We'll see if they're unlikely suspects, but
Potential customers?
potential customers. Sale of a large commercial building in the industrial area, the new manufacturing, large rural parcel. The Planning Commission's viewed two concept plans since we last met as a body in person, and looks like there might be a preliminary plat coming forward in August for a property on 202nd Street. And so I think some big changes in the future. I think there'll be some good changes. That I'm happy to take any questions from council.
Thank you for Donovan. All right. Pete.
Your Honor, council members, I don't have an update tonight, but I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, let's go Chief Peterson and then Dave.
Yeah, Mayor and City Council members, the only item I have for you to update you on tonight is the July 4th festivities. There were no serious problems during that weekend, and for the most part, everything went smoothly and as we hoped. Our officers responded to 240 calls for service over the 4 days, which was July 1st through July 4th. That's approximately 60 calls for service a day, and we usually respond to anywhere from 40 to 50, so not a sharp increase. And definitely want to publicly thank all the city employees that helped out. It's kind of everyone comes to help out for that big event, and I definitely want to thank all of them because there were quite a few of us that helped out throughout that weekend before, during, and after. And other than that, if you have any questions for me.
Thank you for Chief Peterson. Dave, and then we'll circle back to Sandy after Dave.
No updates this evening.
Anything for Dave? Right, Sandy?
No updates unless there's any questions for me.
Yes, how's the billing going, Sandy? The in-house
It
billing
is
for-
going. It's going. It's an implementation process, but no, I
know that, but I was-
no doubt it's going to go. We're going to be sending out some communications and in regards to how the payment process is going to work, which is going to be a transition period for using what we've had in the past, but changing a few things for the future. And other than that, I see it going real well. I
Good.
really do.
Glad to hear it. Thank you.
Fabulous. And Chief Newman?
No updates.
All right.
I have a question for Chief Newman. It actually came from a community member. Just an observation and a curiosity question about mHealth. They're deploying their their SUV ahead of the ambulance. And they were curious about why and when that happened. So sometimes they deploy it and the ambulance then follows. Sometimes they've seen just the SUV. So it's more of a curiosity question. And I said I'd run it up to see what your answer was.
Okay, that SUV is actually a supervisor.
Okay.
And so with the system that they have coverage in Forest Lake, Hugo, and Wyoming where they place ambulances. And so that supervisor, be jumping from call to call, so it may appear that he's kind of on his own. But every once in a while, depending on a call that he's clearing or where he's at, he may beat the ambulance, but he's there to assist them with calls. So it's purely supplemental to the existing service they have. Forest Lake did, under North Ambulance, probably 10 years ago, had a supervisor on staff for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then that just went away. MHL started out with a supervisor, and it appears that they'll probably have a supervisor for at least the near future.
Okay.
But it does save us on fire calls
Oh,
with that extra
interesting.
staffing. So
Okay.
we appreciate that they've got a supervisor that's boots on the ground and really has a good perspective on how the ambulance service is operating around here. So I think it's a huge benefit to our community.
Yeah, it wasn't really a complaint or yeah, I mean, it was more a curiosity question,
Mhm.
you know, because it wasn't anything they had observed before. Does that factor into the response time then, Chief? If the SUV beats the ambulance, or is it the ambulance response time only?
No, when they do their statistics, it's ambulance response.
Only,
Mhm.
okay.
And we will have them next month
Oh, good.
into the council to do a presentation, talk about their first year and what they've seen.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes.
Now I have an answer.
Let's start with council updates. Let's start down with Councilmember Valento.
No updates tonight.
All right. Councilmember Husnick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the EDA meeting before the regular meeting here tonight. Then we started at 5:30 there and talked about our work plan check and the 5 points. And Dan touched a little bit about it tonight on the council meeting. So tomorrow I'll finish off here and no other updates. So thank you.
Councilmember Byström.
No updates, just to thank you to the Legion for the great 4th celebration and our staff,
Yeah.
city staff for their support and keeping our community safe. And I heard wonderful things about the fireworks. They were fabulous.
Echo everything you just said, and also, actually, I got asked a couple of times if we doubled down the budget on fireworks and if we got to use last year's budget, and I don't think that was the case, but it was extraordinary, so kudos to everybody. Councilmember Munson.
No update, just everything that you said about 4th of July, and it was just great to see the community back together and alive again and see everybody out. It was just things are getting back to normal. It was great.
No update here either, other than just to expand a little bit on the EDA meeting. Actually, the EDA meeting that we had today was kind of generally covered, reviewed work plan to date for this year, and then that just rolled right into a budget conversation, and all of those topics were already covered. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.